Now, the CSOs also called for the need to have a defined campaign period in the Constitution to prevent parties in opposition from solely focusing on their political party needs at the detriment of the national good. They again posted that political parties will develop and regularly meet to discuss a 4-year national development agenda, which will be included in their campaign manifestos to ensure that priority is given to national development instead of individual political agenda. So I have in the studio with me now David Agbe, who is the Executive Director of Ghana Institute of Governance and Security. David, it's great to have you on today's Big Story.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
I mean, when we attend such events, the talking is so much. We wonder where the action will come from. You were at the venue. We want to get a better understanding of what you saw as the indicators. Bombande used an expression, we'll get to Bombande on the telephone. It says that mitigators of conflict. What is it that is driving this conclusion that perhaps we should begin to be thinking about electing our district representatives?
Thank you very much, Steve, once again. If you take a critical look at our democratic journey, right from 1992 to now, is almost about 22 years now. And you realize that every single election year, you see a whole lot of issues about insecurity in the country and recurrence of violence across the country. And so what do we need to do to mitigate those circumstances, to make sure that our security agents are alert but a bit of relaxed? But here is the case that there is a lot of tension within the country, and the security services are under pressure to perform to ensure that at least the country does not degenerate into chaos and all that. But if you study a modernized democracy like in US, UK and other countries, you realize that at least every year when there is an election, there is a bit of tension, but it is quite reduced to a certain balance level. But in African continent, you realize that all the time there is enough pressure on the security agencies, and therefore we need to let the people understand that election, it is not about violence, it is not about chaos, it is not about taking gun to shoot one another, but it is a means of a competitive election where we are looking for the best candidate to govern a country. And so when we understand it from that perspective, politics is full of passion, it is full of kind of energy, and everybody wants to become powerful in the country. And so you realize that there is a lot of pressure on the political leaders, but how do we energize the people? How do we educate the society so that the society will be more abreast with enough information as to what needs to be done? You realize that in this country, people do not vote based on a certain ideology, based on a certain note, certain issues being put on the table. But the occasion inform us that Ghanaians do vote based on ethnic and regionalism.
Right.
And
let me get David. Let me quickly get onto the phone lines before I lose Emmanuel Bombande. Emmanuel Bombande is a security expert. Mr. Bombande, good evening and thanks for joining us on today's Big Story.
Good evening, Stephen, and good evening to my brother with you in the studio.
Yes,
and all your listeners.
It's been a while. It's been a while since we spoke.
Yes.
You were at this function. You spoke there. I picked a key expression that we should be mitigating against threats of conflict or something of the sort. Now, among the 5 key suggestions that came forth, one of it is that we should. There is recurring threats of political violence in multi-party elections. From where you stand, is that the case?
Thank you so much. And I want to continue the conversation in the flow with which my brother with you in the studio has been brilliantly doing. Now, he has made an observation that in an election year, we feel a sense of fear and the threat to violence. And so we have to heavily deploy security, invest so much in ensuring that the elections are peaceful. The question is, why should we be doing this every time that we have an election? But do not forget that the environment that leads to that tension is something that we have not even talked about. The use of language, the vituperation, the denigration of one another, the same people, referring to one another in the language of insults, not to even mention the ethnic divide and the politics of ethnocentrism, which is beginning to gain ground. And so what we have done is to address the symptoms. And by addressing the symptoms, I mean we massively engage in the type of peaceful campaign, prayers for the elections to be peaceful. Then we go back home, and for 4 years we watch. And when we approach the next election, we go back to the same cycle. So if we want to address the threat or the recurrent threat to political violence, let's go to the structural issues which are at the root. Now, one of them is the siege mentality, that elections must be won at all costs for the simple reason that it's a winner takes all. So you have to win in order to have everything. And that siege mentality is at the root of the threat of the violence. So why don't we open the political space, engage in the type of meaningful conversation that allows the political space right from the district level to the national level to be opened in such a way that nobody can win everything 100%. And that you might win the presidency, you might win even as majority in parliament, but you cannot win in all districts. And that you might not win in all districts or at the level of parliament, you can win the presidency.
But Mr. Bombande, we've heard these arguments before. It's not the first time that there have been such calls and such suggestions. What is the guarantee that, I mean, anybody who is listening, the political actors, government, and the civil society groups are going to take it serious this time around?
Precisely the point. And that's why today's event was the inauguration that must continue now to engage all of us, all stakeholders. Now, if you were following and listening attentively to the period before the election, and particularly after the elections leading up to the Supreme Court verdict, everybody in this country, all social groups, private sector, civil society, religious leaders, everybody was calling for an end to the winner takes all. But you notice that after the Supreme Court verdict, that clarion call has weakened and has become non-existent. So by having the launch or the inauguration of this national interest dialogue, we now want to engage and have this process of a collective stakeholder engagement that now weighs heavily on the constitutional review process to include the necessary elements that require the amendments so that we are not seeing ourselves again in a lethargy of simply waiting and addressing political violence in election years.
Right, Mr. Bombande, I'll have you hold, bounce back to the studio. David, Mr. Bombande has raised key issues. He mentioned the specific areas that need amendment. I mean, we mustn't be going in the dark. We must find the exact things to do. So one of the suggestions is to vote DCs and municipal chief executives into office. Is this workable considering the kind of social structure and systems that we have in our country? Is it possible?
Steve, I think that it is workable if we are able to dialogue with the political parties.
So the key issue is dialogue.
Precisely so, because NDC has its own philosophy and ideology, and MPP do have same, and other smaller parties. You realize that all the time NDC, MPP almost about 98% of the total vote.
Which is the duopoly that you are also worried about.
Precisely. So when we are able to meet these two main political parties, to dialogue with them, that this is the way we want to ensure that we dramatize democracy at the grassroots level, but not at the point where it becomes like a certain group of people. Let's try to dramatize democracy across the grassroots so that everybody will have a stake. Everybody will have a sense of belongingness that this is the type of governance that
David,
we want to practice.
It's easier said than done. I mean, we still live in a system where political parties don't receive any funding from anywhere. They need to depend on their core members to raise funds. So MPP and NDC, which are the big political parties, are able to do much better in raising revenue and being able to reach the people with their message. CPP is unable to because it's a small party. So how then do we get effective dialogue if these disparities still exist?
Anyway, in this country, for instance, if you should say that people should, donate money to political parties, or I should pay a certain, contribution to a certain political party, it's a bit dicey in a sense that people are not seeing, political leaders, their style, their leadership qualities reflecting in their lives, style. And so people are a bit skeptical when it comes to those things that the state need to found political parties, political financing and all those things. It will be quite difficult for us to convince Ghanaians that this is the way it needs to go. But the political parties need to find their own ways of resourcing their own political parties until we get to a certain level of maturity where we realize that our political leaders are actually contributing into our daily life.
So you don't subscribe to central government funding of political parties?
Not at all. Unless we see them being practical, being implementing certain policies that will reflect in the daily life of a common Ghanaian. But the way we are seeing it now, it looks as if they are taking all the resources where the majority are being neglected. And so they don't actually let us feel their leadership, skills and their leadership qualities reflecting in the entire country and the citizenry. So we need to see their actions. We need to see them doubling all those kind of leadership skills so that Ghanaians can actually trust them that, yes, we voted for them to go and benefit the entire country. In today's dialogue, for instance, we notice that the MPs, for instance, people are beginning to see them as they are just in parliament to champion their own cause, and they are benefiting from that, where the majority of Ghanaians who voted for them are being neglected. And so we need to see political leaders being practical. Let's see them being people who are championing for a common cause for Ghanaians. Let us have that common feeling of, that they are looking for our interests. They want us to also feel the governance, process. They want us to see that, yes, democracy is for everybody. And so if it is for everybody, we also need to benefit from any contribution, from any state resources. That is what we are all looking for. So on that score, I would say that my senior Dr. Bombandi is actually contributing to knowledge. And that is what we want to rally behind so that all of us will champion a common cause to tell politicians. Here we are in Ghana. Most of the academicians are afraid of politicians. But in other parts of the jurisdiction, it is not so. The academia need to also rise up to tell us that, no, you are not in a classroom alone. Contribute to the social discourse for us to see the benefits of your maybe professorship or doctoral this thing that you've done. So academia, everybody need to tell politicians that, no, enough it is enough. We expect you to do so much for us. Let us, have the benefits of the country, enough resources. There are thousands of resources are in this country, but we are not benefiting from politicians. And so we are seeing them as people who are being individualistic rather than looking for a common national interest for entire country. That is what we are all looking for.
Right now, Mr. Babande, I mean, the key issue here is grassroots participation. I know that your West African Network for Peace Building, WANEP, has involved or engaged grassroots participation in everything, including conflict resolution. But is this grassroots participation not the same thing that is leading us to the chaos? If the political parties go on the ground with their message, they twist the message, people get confused about exactly what to do in response to specific situations. So where can we streamline it?
Yes, Stephen, you observe that the reason why politicians, let's say at national level, can arrive in a community and twist the information as you stated is precisely because the decision making and the power is concentrated at the center, and the communities do not have that, if you would call it power, on their own to be able to resist or respond in a way that meets their own interests. And it's for that reason I alluded to my own experience in peace building practice. It is when the communities feel that the decision from Accra is weighing heavily on how the outcome of a conflict is likely to be, that the community actually now goes into violence. And they have their own set of interpretations. Maybe one side of the conflict has someone near government or someone in cabinet or someone highly influential. Even if that person did nothing, the perception in the community is that he or she is the one who influenced government to make those decisions. Now turn it around. If we open that space, what we are saying is that from sanitation, environmental cleanliness, you name it, every district should take the ownership of how your district should look like and how it is organized and how it is governed. And the central government now supports. Then what that means is very many people will begin to cultivate those skills of working together, regardless of which political divide they come from. Because our people do not disagree with the basic needs that are common to all of them: water, sanitation, electricity, and the rest of it. It is hard to achieve these that now fall in the hands of manipulation by politicians at national level in creating the confusions and the conflict that you talked about.
So, David, let me take you from what Bombande just said. Right now, the key issue that we're addressing is now to make decentralization more beneficial to the people, taking decentralization one step further by allowing the people to vote into power their own district municipal representatives. But is our local governance system strong enough to sustain this? What do we need to make it stronger in order to make this possible?
I think that is all about institutional, structures. We need to break a certain status quo at a point in time to be able to make a headway. If we continue to remain at where we are, we will continue to do the same thing. And so we need to, at a point in time, to challenge the status quo and say that no, now we need to do a strong strategic analysis and choice, and then we'll be able to, move forward as against the normal status quo. This is the way it must be done, and so we'll remain there until thy kingdom come. So let's try as much as possible to ensure that all the people, all the organizations come together, and we ensure that what needs to be done at the appropriate time for everybody at various constituency level to benefit from the local governance system. That is why I said earlier on that we need to dramatize democracy at the grassroots level. When we are able to do that, and we think that we bring everybody on board, where everybody becomes part of the decision-making process, we are involving everybody. We are letting people have a sense of belongingness into any policy that is being crafted by the executive. And then we see the implementation also reflecting in the lifestyle of the people. Then we are getting to a certain maturity stage. But if we are saying that we'll draft the policies from Accra here, and then the implementation too, we are in Accra trying to implement it, no, we might not get the right course of action that we want it to be reflected at the local level. So let's try to ensure that the democracy is deepening across every length and breadth of the country. When we are able to do that, yes, then we will say that yes, we are achieving a certain success of democracy. And so we should let the people be involved in any action, any decision that we are taking. Just like 1992 Constitution, if you recall, when they were drafting the 1992 Constitution, butchers and all those people were involved. And so now, as we speak now, we've still identified that there are certain disabilities in the Constitution.
But that town hall concept hasn't been so successful in Ghana, where you meet groups and you get consensus from them to add to the governance structure or decision-making of the local level. These haven't worked.
I know
so
very
why are
well
we going back and forth to these same issues that don't work?
It is a learning process. So at a point in time, when what you've put in place is not working well, you have to go back to the drawing board.
We have been learning for 20 years now.
But knowledge is all about a learning process. So we should continue to learn and be able to improve on our strategies. And then we should also make sure that always we have a certain strategy. And then we should always also appoint people who have the right skills and the knowledge and the techniques to be able to do what is good for the country. Right. And so that is the core. That is the core, that we need to appoint people who are competent enough, not that because they are always being seen on a campaign platform and so they have every skill.
Yeah.
As for shouting, everybody can shout. But doing the job, to benefit everybody, it's a different ballgame.
Right. I'm very grateful, David, and I'm grateful to you, to Mr. Emmanuel Bombande. I'm sorry we couldn't come back to you because we don't have a lot of time. But this is today's big story, and we've been looking at the issue of making decentralization and local government work for the people. My name is Stephen Anti. We'll be right back with an interactive segment. Stay with us.